Welcome to the Income Outcome Show, a podcast publication part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network. The Income Outcome Show is dedicated to pharmacists, pharmacy technicians, pharmacy students, and all pharmacy professionals interested in maximizing their income and providing insights into living a financially free lifestyle.
All matters discussed during this podcast are for informational purposes only. Opinions expressed herein are solely those of Waypoint Strategic Advisors, LLC, and our editorial staff. Material presented is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representations as to its accuracy or completeness. All information and ideas should be discussed in detail with your individual advisor prior to implementation. The presence of this podcast shall in no way be construed or interpreted as a solicitation to sell or offer to sell advisory services to anyone. Waypoint Strategic Advisors, LLC is not affiliated with or endorsed by any government agency and are not engaged in the practice of law. Content should not be viewed as an offer to buy or sell any of the securities mentioned or as legal or tax advice. You should always consult an attorney or tax professional regarding your specific legal or tax situation.
And now here are your hosts of the Income Outcome Show, Ben Coakley with Waypoint Strategic Advisors and Joe Castleman with Pharmacist Financial.
All right, welcome to the Income Outcomes Show. Joe, how are you today, my man?
Good. How about you, Ben?
Doing well, man. Doing well. We are at the Texas Pharmacy Association annual conference here. So how do you like in Houston?
Houston, I'm used to Houston. How you liking it?
A little hot and muggy. Well, I just came from Vegas, Joe. I flew in last night. I didn't go to sleep one night. It was kind of interesting. It was interesting time.
So what you like better, Vegas or Texas?
Now Texas, because I'm here. I'm kind of thankful Vegas is over, out of my system. So what are we talking about today, Joe?
We're going to talk about independence planning.
Exactly. So when I hear independence planning, oftentimes I think we work with independently owned pharmacies. Mm-hmm. We work with people who strive for financial independence.
Yep.
So there's a whole bunch of different definitions of independence. Have you heard the same thing?
Yeah, and I'd say the first thing that comes to mind is financial independence, the idea of retirement or being able to retire. But I think what we're kind of talking about, and of course that's one piece of it, but I think we're also talking about freedom.
Yeah, absolutely. Being able to do what you want to do when you want to do it. Whether that's at retirement or whether that's owning a business. I think the key there is that we hear frequently, we ask that what's your definition of independence?
Yeah.
And we hear frequently it's being an owner, we hear it's financial independence, we hear it's not being dependent on other people for success. We hear a lot of different reasons why people think they're independent or they want to be independent. So I think my role today, Joe, is to tell you a little bit about the independent side of ownership, and I think you're going to talk a little bit about financial independence.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about financial independence. Joe, tell me, what are some rules of thumb about financial independence that people need to think about?
Well, I think the first thing that comes to mind is we all want to get there, but it doesn't necessarily mean you have to stop doing what you're doing. I think the idea of retirement for a lot of people is, yes, they're going to stop working. But I think when you and I and our clients, when we're talking about financial independence, we're talking about, do you have enough savings, investments, and assets or passive income to have the ability to not work?
Yeah, I think I heard somebody say one time, man at work versus capital at work.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so you're talking about capital at work here.
Yeah, and it's So from a purely financial plan standpoint, it would be that you have enough assets or investments or wherever your money is that it could produce annual income for the rest of your life without worry.
Yeah, and I heard another saying the other day that I really loved. It said, your most important number during retirement is 8. 8 hours of sleep a night.
Not worrying about it.
Yeah, not worrying about it, right? So having enough. Now, Joe, we hear statistics all the time. I know in pharmacy, y'all are the king and queens of statistics out there. Like how many, we measure star ratings for pharmacy owners and pharmacies and all about the metrics, right? Well, I heard a study the other day about how many people are actually physically ready for financial independence. I heard 2 out of 10. That's what I heard. Is that what you're seeing?
Yeah, I'd see around that, and I would also assume that most people overestimate how much they can spend off their investments in retirement. So, $1 million is not the same as it used to be.
do they underestimate how much they need?
Correct.
And overestimate how much they will generate?
Spend,
Yeah, that's an interesting concept. So it's a double whammy.
Yeah,
there.
so you could make an assumption and think you're going to have enough financial independence to produce income for the rest of your life, and that's key. I think that's key, because you could have your assets produce income for a couple of years, but then if it runs out, you're not really independent. You just took a break.
Yeah. So I mean, so what are the strategies? I mean, what kind of strategies do we have? I assume there's pre-retirement strategies and there's post-retirement strategies. What are we talking about?
On the post-retirement strategies, there's several things, and there's rules of thumb, and there's studies, and there's also personal preferences. I think if you were to ask, maybe your parents or generation before, the typical strategy was live off the interest. You've got the principal, and hopefully you can earn enough interest per year, and the idea is that you don't ever spend your principal because you don't want to have to run out of money. I guess that's the goose, and the eggs are your annual income, but you're not going to eat the goose.
Sure. But what are some pre-retirement strategies? That's post. What are pre-retirement strategies?
To go back to the post, there are other strategies that other people would say, well, you don't need to keep your principal intact. You can spend it down. You can essentially annuitize it, whether you use an annuity or you just do it yourself, where you spend down over your retirement years and you essentially leave less to your beneficiaries.
Sure.
And so pre-retirement, well, that's a whole other conversation. There's quite a few things to get you to financial independence.
We have an actual letter from a client of ours who, he's one of the wealthier clients, and he retired at 60.
Yeah.
And he was explaining a story about, he was in the airport, and he said, I had just retired, and I'm a pharmacist, and this lady looked at him and said, well, I guess I just wasn't that fortunate to be a pharmacist.
Yeah.
And he said he thought about it for a little while, and then it really, really, really ticked him off, Joe, because he said that lady had no idea how hard he had worked to retire by 60. And he sent us this letter, and he said if pharmacists would do these 10 things, they'd retire by 60 years old.
Yeah.
We're going to include that. I'm going to include that on this webinar. If you're reading this, at the bottom, click this, and I'm going to give you that advice, because you need that advice. It's real simple advice.
Yeah, that's the thing I noticed when I read it, is 8 out of the 10 are very common sense. You've probably heard of it. But I think what I took away from that letter is he was saying, look, I'm a pharmacist, yes. I've worked 40 years, but I actually did what I needed to do to save the money.
Yeah.
I think he was also saying, in his own way, that he didn't get there quickly. There wasn't any shortcut. He just paid his dues. He worked hard, and he did what he needed to do.
Yeah. And I actually got the pleasure of spending an entire evening at Disney World with this particular gentleman. And I just remember sitting there thinking to myself, like, he's so down to earth, but it just used common sense. Common sense. He didn't overspend. He lived within his means. He didn't drive a fancy schmancy sports car.
Yeah.
He did what he needed to do, because he knew at some point there was going to be a life after pharmacy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the most important thing that we're trying to reiterate here to everybody who's listening, is there will be a day. You may get called home to the big pharmacy in the sky. You may die with your boots on. We're in Texas, right?
Yeah.
Go out with your boots on,
and
right?
Cowboy hat,
Yeah. Button up your bootstraps and and get on with it, right? But the idea is that if you want the option to get out and retire and live and accomplish the things you've always wanted to accomplish without being strapped to a 40-hour-a-week job, that advice is imperative to listen to.
Well, and this kind of ties into what you're going to talk about next, Ben. But when I work with a lot of staff pharmacists, one of the things we talk about, and that we also notice, is there are a lot of pharmacists that are unhappy. They feel stuck while they're in their pharmacy career. And I think part of what we help them realize is, how do we look? You're going to have to work regardless until you're actually ready to be financially independent and willing to retire. But while you're working, if you have started to take care of your financial priorities and goals, and you're saving, you have this other type of independence. You don't feel dragged down and that's a burden to go to work every day. You actually have a renewed sense of why you became a pharmacist in the first place, and I think that's independence too.
Yeah, and it doesn't revolve around money, Joe.
Yeah.
People ask me all the time about financial advice, and I said, well, the thing you gotta understand is it's not about how much money you have. Now, you gotta have some for financial independence. Don't get me wrong. But if you go into anything with the idea that you're going to make $1 bazillion and that's going to make you happier, Joe, it's just not going to. The best financial advice that I ever got, I love this. I told this to my cousin the other day, and I remember he sat there with me. He said, that is the most sage advice I've ever received. There's 2 ways to be rich in this life, Joe. One is that you can be born into this unbelievable life of luxury, and there are some people who are. The other one is just not want so much.
Yeah.
Joe, so the idea is if we just don't want, we don't have to drive, it's okay. That person driving the BMW that pulls up beside you, Joe, he or she, they're broke.
Yeah.
You know why? Because they got a $1,200 a month car payment.
Yeah.
You're driving that just average car. It could be a nice car. I want it to be a safe car, especially if you have a family. Listen, I have a family and we drive a Honda Pilot. Mm-hmm. It's not a luxurious car, but it's a nice car. It's big enough. I feel comfortable, my wife driving it. But it didn't cost me an arm and a leg to buy. It didn't cost me. And you know what? And if it just not wanting so much is so important, and that makes your life a lot easier. And guess what? Another definition of independence, you brought it up, is being free from the chains of materialism that bind us, Joe.
Yeah.
And that is really important. I will tell you, there's a thing called Facebook envy.
Yeah.
I get it sometimes. I'm sure you get it.
Yeah.
You see your friends and they're traveling, they buy the new car. Guess what? Bill and Sue are in Costa Rica again, Joe.
Yeah.
What you don't know is they're dead broke.
Yeah.
And if they got hurt or sick tomorrow, guess what?
Yeah.
They couldn't pay their bills in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And so the idea is if we truly understand these principles, we can truly build a life of independence and ultimately build a life after pharmacy.
Yes.
Which can be pretty robust if you do some simple things.
Yeah, so what about the independence of actually pharmacy ownership, or the pharmacist that's not an owner that wants to be one? What are they really striving for there? Because a lot of successful owners that I've had a chance to meet, even if they're getting close to quote-unquote retirement age, that's really not their goal.
Yeah, Joe, that's an interesting thing. When we ask people what's your definition of independence, particularly owners, we hear a lot, well, I'm already independent.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I can do what I want to do. I can control my schedule. Now, we talk to some who aren't.
Yeah.
They say,
they're not there yet.
Yeah, they say, I'm an owner, and I'm chained to my dang counter.
Yeah.
Because I have to be.
Yeah.
Well, but the idea of being your own boss is pretty, appealing at this point. So I think the concept of independence, again, it means different things. We've met several owners here who own multiple pharmacies.
Yeah.
They would tell you, I'm independent.
Yeah.
Because they get to call their own shots and do their own things. Now, I will tell you, when we ask them about PPMs, they say, oh, maybe I'm not as independent as I want to be. If I were getting paid cash for my patients, maybe I'm a little bit more independent. But the idea is that some people want to choose a path where they can have some more control and say over their own destiny.
Yeah. And what's interesting, too, is I think some people, when they hear independence, they may say, oh, well, I'd love to be able to write my own schedule so I could take every Friday off or whatever. But here's the thing. That is true, but what ends up happening when you really have that feeling of independence, freedom, as an owner or similar, and you can take the Friday off, what happens? You don't. You actually end up working more because you enjoy it so much more. And that's part of that feeling of being free because you are independent.
Sure. Joe, it comes down to passion.
Yeah.
Purpose and passion.
Yeah.
And if your purpose and passion is to serve people, but we have people who their purpose and passion is to serve people, but they also tell me that they want to spend the time with their family and stuff like that. So the only way that I know how to do that, to have your cake and eat it too, and per se, or to have as much cake as you can and eat it too, is to be your own be your own owner, own your own company, own your own pharmacy. And I think we're seeing a lot of people kind of move down that path. With that being said, what I think you said is important, because when you have people who want to be in control of their own destiny, want to do that. We heard it saying today, to much is given, much is expected, right?
Exactly.
It creates another level of expectation that you have. And it also creates this perception that you can have everything. And I think that's important to really clarify that being your own owner, sure, you have a sense of independence, but you have a tremendous responsibility as well. Joe, and when things break down, you're responsible. You're responsible for it. And I'm not trying to rain on anybody's ownership parade here, but we own our own companies. When things go south, we're responsible. We may not be to blame, but we're responsible. And I think that's important to bring up.
No, I agree. And I think, go back to what you said a second ago, you don't have to be an owner to have that independence, that feeling. That is the one type of ownership, independence that you're talking about. But if you're the staff pharmacist that's financially or very close to being financially independent, you may never want to be an owner, but you have just as much freedom. You may not be able to call the shots per se as much as the actual owner can, but you have that confidence ability to say, you know what, I'm doing this because I want to.
That is a huge deal.
Yeah, not because I have to live paycheck to paycheck, and
Yeah, I think I was referencing some of the stuff that I've written about making $120,000 living paycheck to paycheck. Those
There's
people,
no independence if you're doing that. I'm sorry.
Sorry, if you're out there and you're listening to this and you're living paycheck to paycheck, making $100,000,
we need to change it immediately.
Yeah, absolutely. You need to reach out to me, reach out to Joe, because that is no way to live. And the other thing that's amazing, Joe, we talk about, there's a great proverb, and it's in the Bible about the borrower being slave to the lender. So for those of you out there who are mired in debt, I hate to break it to you, but that is no way. If you want to be independent, that is no way. You got to get out of debt. And I know we talked about being here. There's a bunch of students here. We've talked about doing a podcast on student debt and what people's perception of debt. And I don't care if you are completely comfortable with debt. I don't care. You
cannot be financially independent or independent in any way, shape, or form if you have debt.
That is, and the people who build the most wealth are the ones who get out of debt. And I had a client one time tell me this, and I've lived by this motto ever since. I was 20 years old, and I said, man, what's the difference between me and you? This guy's net worth was $40 million, by the way. He goes, Ben, the difference between...
That'd be like $39.5 million.
He goes,
sorry.
No, but it's funny. It cracks me up because every time I think about this, I chuckle because it's so simple. He said, Ben, the difference between me and you is I earn interest and you pay interest. And I said,
it goes back to that when we started the show about the example of the fancy car, the $1,200 a month payment. I'll tell you what, if you can pay cash for the car, and because you have enough, or you have enough earning interest that pays for the car itself, that's totally different.
Yeah. So Joe, let's go through some questions maybe that we've received about independence. I get the question, like, what target should I shoot for financial independence?
You mean like how much do we need?
Not even how much do we need, like what age?
Oh, what age, yeah.
And how much income do I need to replace? That kind of stuff. I get that question all the time.
Yeah, and the trick there is that it does depend on your situation. I think if planned right and correctly, you don't need as much as you're earning today. The challenge is that there's other variables involved. You don't know how long you're going to live, and there's different rules of thumb and different planning techniques where it's say, like, for example, the 4% rule that says, okay, for every $1 million you can produce $40,000 a year. Now, if you're making 120, you're going to sit there and go, well, I need $3 million
to replace all my income.
Yeah. Or you could say, what would it look like if I only had $2 million?
Yeah.
And so it kind of depends on which way you want to go. But I think if you really start to get your spending manageable and you're prudent with your money, you'll find out that you don't need as much in retirement.
Yeah, I hear different theories on that. I have seen situations where a client needs 100% replacement ratio for the first 10 years.
Some people maybe need 120.
Yeah. And then it dials back down as my grandfather, love him to death. Before he passed away, he was a testament to this. He, first 15 years of retirement, he traveled all over the place, but as he got older, he started dialing it back, stay closer to home, right?
Yeah. So I think if you were to take the average over all his retirement years, it's not 100%.
Yeah, it might be 80%, something
it may be
like
100
that.
initially because he's maybe more, but because he travels a lot. But then after, by the time he's towards his latter years,
Yeah, I actually drew it out one time. It almost looks like a reverse bell curve.
Yeah.
So it's high at first, dips down, and then gets higher.
Yeah.
Close you get to dying because your health care costs.
There's
go
healthcare
up.
costs, which if you're doing proper planning, we've already taken that into account.
Yeah. So Joe, what kind of impact does inflation have? I mean, what are we talking about here? Because I think people forget sometimes.
Do we want to scare the audience?
No, we don't want to scare them, but we want to tell them the truth about inflation.
Let's go back to that $1 million example with the 40,000.
Well, let's talk about inflation.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
No, I know you are. I know you are. But let's talk about the perception.
Oh, the perception.
People, I don't think people truly understand inflation, Joe.
I don't think you and I do, unless we're actually talking about it and thinking about it.
No, but I mean, it's like when you draw a line, you say in 1964 a gallon of milk was 20 cents to here, but next year a gallon of milk it went from $3.30 to $3.33.
Yeah, you don't notice it in the short term.
Yeah, it's the long-term impact is way more impactful to us than the short term because we don't see it.
Well, and somebody told me one time the idea of, you may know this, how do you cook a frog? How do you boil it slowly until he's cooked. Because if you just throw the frog in hot water, it's going to jump out. So it's that gradually increasing. He doesn't even notice it. So I think that's the reality with us. And I think it's only when you look back or you're trying to plan financially looking forward that you realize, whoa, okay, if I said a second ago I need $1 million to produce 40,000, well, in order to produce 40,000 in 30 years,
it's 120.
Well, yeah, or instead of needing $1 million, you might need $2.5 million.
Yeah.
Okay, well then that's no longer a 4% rule. As far as like in retirement, that's
Absolutely.
more like a 1%.
Yeah.
So it can really now the challenge is that there's inflation. That's the consumer price index, cost of goods that you have no control over. But then there's also a personal inflation. So what you spend your money on. So if you actually have your spending under control, you can actually hedge or minimize the effects of inflation on your own personal economy.
Yeah, it just still amazes me. Like I'm in this business and I still can't see the short-term effects of inflation.
Well, yeah.
No, I'm just saying, it just amazes me.
Well, I mean, last time you went to a restaurant and had to order a hamburger, did you notice that they charged 75 cents more than last time you were there? No.
Depends on how many times I eat there.
Yeah.
But you're right. Depends on how many times I eat there. But the more subtle difference is the 6 cent increase on your milk, the 6 cents increase on your eggs. When we have like out of control inflation, you notice that.
Sure. But even in the short term, it's still...
Yeah, it's still hard to see. When we run inflation projections and we show 3.9%, sometimes I get the look like, man, it doesn't go up 3.9%. I'm like, yes, it does on average.
Depending on who you ask, that can be conservative.
I know, but it's on average.
On average, yeah.
So one year it may not go up at all. Next year it may go up 7%.
Yeah.
Just do me a favor out there. Just watch your news reports and tell me how many times you see, well, the peach crop we had a deep freeze in April, and it killed all the peach crops. The peach crop's going to be about twice the cost.
Yeah.
That's inflation.
Yeah.
you average that out, and it averages up to 4 to 5% on average every year. So,
well, I remember one good example. You could just take any product, and one good example would be the cost of a postage stamp. And if you go back to like 1950 or something, it's like 5 cents or 2 cents. And then if you look at it now, I don't even know what it is now.
49 cents,
49
I believe,
cents.
Joe.
So if you just do a basic calculator, it works out to like 4.5 or 5%.
And they still can't get my mail on time to me. I don't get it.
But interestingly, they have a hedge against inflation because you can buy those forever stamps.
I do buy the forever.
So you can lock in the future rate of the postage.
Yeah. Quite honestly, Joe, I think all the stamps they sell now are forever stamps because they got tired of people complaining about the increases. So all right, Joe, let's wrap it up here, man. We've been about 22 minutes into this. So any advice you want to give?
Well,
anything you've seen here at TPA that you want to explain?
I think the financial independence, independence in general is what a lot of pharmacists actually want. The ones that truly obtain it have to do planning, and they have to combine that planning with action. And by action, they save. They actually do what they need to do. Just like your client that wrote the letter, that worked for 40 years and retired, he didn't just talk about it. He didn't just plan, he actually did it.
Yeah, and I think setting up a system for success, and guys, and ladies, we have a real simple system that we follow, and it provides the accountability that can really help y'all achieve your retirement, your independence goals. Whether that's being an owner, whether that's financial independence, it does not matter. They are within your reach, Joe, but I will tell you.
Very much in your reach, but also very much out of your reach if you don't do the right thing.
Yeah, you got to work.
Yep, got to work.
You got to put the work in. I would say the system of success is the same, whether you want to get the best deal on that car you're buying, or whether you want to achieve your financial independence goals, or whether you want to buy a pharmacy. The system of success is the same. We'll be glad to explain that system to them, Joe. If they call you, how do they reach out to you, Joe?
You can reach me. I'll give you my cell phone direct. You can text me, 512-294-7046.
Or you can text Ben Coakley at 843-810-3983. Joe is Joe C at waypointus.com. I'm Ben at waypointrx.com. We'd love to hear from you guys. We appreciate y'all listening, and let's say goodnight, Joe.
Good night.
All right, bye-bye.
Interested in learning more about maximizing your income and living a financially free lifestyle? Contact the Income Outcomes Show today to learn more about your financial possibilities and best practices in managing your money to create opportunities for lasting wealth. Go to pharmacypodcast.com under the contact section and send us a message, and we'll get back to you within 24 hours. Thanks for listening to the Income Outcomes Show, a podcast publication part of the Pharmacy Podcast Network.